politics is central to the formation of all these policies, and hopefully there's enough content in this semester to give you guys some leads in getting a better handle on those policies. Let me pause for a second. Any other observations in this table of patterns that look interesting or noteworthy? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, everybody wants to circumnavigate the marketing board when you're getting paid so little, and that's been a chronic issue. To some extent, the ability of people to circumnavigate the board puts something of a floor on how low a price can be offered by the board. And if you offer a price that's just so low, everybody's going to abandon the board. So I think it was a little bit of a game in terms of setting a price that was sort of high enough that farmers would stay in the system, but low enough that you could squeeze them. And in the immediate post-independence period, with some of these prices, clearly government sort of went too far, and then no one was selling to the board anymore. So I think your point on farmers wanting to find ways to circumnavigate is the central problem for governance here. But all of us would do the same thing if it was our livelihood. We would try to get the best price we could. Right? Yeah.
I was just thinking, I don't know what kind of supply chain that the marketing board might be providing, but obviously they're likely too low. But would we expect the marketing board to only be providing something below the average market rate if they're providing as a supply chain?
Exactly. And so I'm kind of focusing on the negative now, and I'll try to bring in some of the positive a little bit later on. And this varies so much from country to country that it's very hard to generalize. But there certainly are cases where for particular crops, I mean, this is true for some of the cash crops in Ghana, for instance, that even though the marketing boards weren't paying a very high price, there were credit arrangements that they had with farmers. And again, they were this huge purchaser, had lots of revenue, and they weren't going anywhere. So they turned out to be a pretty good financial institution in the sense that they could lend you money before harvest and basically deduct the interest at harvest when they bought your crop, etc. So the interlinkages there allow them to offer credit, offer extension support, and in fact they have some incentives to do that. So the flip side of all this is once the marketing boards go away, for the most part, and lots of them were weakened by the late 80s into the early 90s, even though there's some benefits in terms of there being a competitive environment on the buy side, you do lose some of these other services. So you would expect there to be some sort of differential, but probably not a 60% or 70% differential. Did you have your hand up as well? Yeah. Yeah.
How did they get into marketing board? Like, who got into marketing board?
What do you mean? I don't understand.
Who were hired into marketing board? The test or the lab?
I think that'll vary so much from country to country, and just different countries have different recruitment schemes, so it's very hard for me to know or generalize. But yeah.
There's another question I have. Was there a harsh legal punishment for
Definitely, and I think one of the interesting things that we're going to come to it is when smuggling became rampant for some of these crops, then there's also ways to circumvent that fine. So again, if you have a fine that's extremely large, you're the customs official, you catch me smuggling. Now I have every incentive to sort of share some of my crop with you, so you won't fine me or imprison me or whatever it is. So there's again a tension there. The larger you make the fine, the more likely you make it that the smuggler and the government official are engaged in some sort of collusion to circumvent the fine. And we'll talk about that. That's a very important issue. Yeah. I think that, this is a period. Actually, this is a period in Kenya of sort of less and less political competition. So there wasn't as much open debate on these issues in this period when Kenya was sort of a de facto one-party state than there would have been otherwise. But the truth is, I'm not exactly sure what the official rationale was on this. But this isn't a democratic period where an opposition party could stand up and say, "This is crazy. We're going to cooperative growers. Let's overthrow Kanu in the next election," because there was nowhere to go politically. You have to sort of be within the ruling party. Yeah.
Well, is it possible that the large boutique states for popular benefiting electronic casino is this way to incentivize the larger members?
That's interesting. So if you're saying pay more for the types of arrangements you think are more efficient to incentivize people to form larger states, I don't think that's what was going on. But it's an interesting idea that in the long run, if government there could be price differentials in place for these dynamic reasons. In other words, to sort of incentivize certain behaviors over time. That's a pretty interesting idea. I don't think that's what drove it, according to Bates, but it's a very interesting idea. Okay, so let me go back to a question. This came up last time we were talking about corruption, but Bates, just at the start of this chapter, kind of encapsulates this idea. Why would reasonable people adopt public policies that have harmful consequences for their societies? Now, this is a little bit of a harsh indictment of agricultural policy in Africa in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, just because so many rulers, might have thought reasonably that we do need to subsidize industry. We do want to become developed countries. That's the way to do it. So, you could argue that their goals actually were, pro-development. At the same time, within a few years, it was clear that a lot of these policies were disastrous in rural areas. So who benefited? Why did this happen? This is just going to be a totally, crass political economy analysis. Let's move ideology aside. We're not going to talk about, long-run goals in terms of industrialization, but just basically in the short run, who was benefiting from these arrangements, and does it make sense that these policies would have persisted for decades given this? So first, who benefited? The first clear positive was in terms of central government revenue. And that could serve many purposes. Increasing central government revenue could fund schools and health clinics. It could also be money that's squandered, as we saw in the Reineke and Svensson case. So increasing revenue, if a lot of revenue leaks, if 50% of it gets stolen, then the people who can access that revenue benefit. But some of it, presumably, this increased revenue would go towards good programs too. Okay, so that's one clear beneficiary. The second clear beneficiaries in all the anecdotal evidence are law enforcement and customs officials. So if I'm the individual who's supposed to enforce purchases through the marketing board, and I find out you're selling outside the marketing board, I can make tons of money. You have a crop worth $500 there, give me $100, I'll look the other way, you can sell it. If I do that a few times a day, I'm doing really, really well. Same things for customs officials with smuggling. So once smuggling becomes widespread, there's a general point, customs officials are never poor in any country. And they're not poor because of this issue. So you're smuggling, fine, go ahead, sell it to Kenya, I just need a cut. And those arrangements get worked out. And over time, actually, the smugglers develop relationships with certain customs officials. And there's just a certain amount that's known. So you caught me again. Okay, here's a third of what I have, and I'm on my way. This does happen in the U.S. too, and in developed countries too. Not to name any names or who else is going to benefit? Obviously, smugglers and organized crime. So if there are people who can somehow organize the purchase of these crops and either sell them internally at prices higher than the board prices, or sell them in other countries, you can make a lot of money. So smugglers and organized crime are going to benefit a lot from these arrangements. And they have a large stake in maintaining this sort of prohibition regime. It's the same reason why no one loves U.S. drug policy more than drug cartels, because it just makes them so much money. They're the main beneficiaries of our policies. So it goes on and on. And then, of course, the bureaucrats working for the marketing boards could benefit too. Now, they're not necessarily going to be the ones taking the bribes, but these marketing boards in many countries just became massive entities. They were hugely overstaffed. And if you think of this from the point of view of a political party, imagine it's a one-party state. So most of sub-Saharan Africa, after the late 60s, is characterized by non-competitive political systems with one-party states. And the marketing boards are bringing in 20 to 40% of government revenue. There's just tons of money there. you can stack those agencies with political appointments, basically, or political patronage appointments. So, rather than returning a lot of the money to the farmers or in government revenue for health and education, you can triple the size of the staff in the Agricultural Marketing Board and hire all your friends and gain lots of political allies that way. So there's a political patronage rationale here that, again, Bates talks about in excruciating detail. If you guys have already read that chapter, just country after country, sort of how this worked. How did this system work? Okay, let me pause for a second. Who else benefited? I have another 5 more, but maybe you guys can come up with them. Say that again? Uh-huh. Oh, well, like we were saying, if other smugglers from other countries try to sell in Kenya, then Kenya is sort of getting a cut of their coffee, right? So that's a very interesting one. Okay, it's a bit like the Kenya-Tanzania example before. Any others in the back here? That's right. So if we can pay our farmers very little and we manage to do that, then sure, we're pretty competitive. We can sell our product at good prices globally and benefit global consumers, actually, right? So you can think of this as, if a lot of the coffee is actually being drunk in the 70s by coffee-addicted Europeans and North Americans, and they're getting lower prices because African government, Kenya and Tanzania can sell their coffee cheap on world markets. They're benefiting, and the African farmers are losing. That's one way to think of the redistribution. Yeah. Exactly. So some of these marketing boards targeted food crops, not just export commodities like coffee, and to the extent that led to lower urban food prices, urban business people and workers and factory workers and business and government officials benefited. So those are clear beneficiaries. So to the extent that you can push down prices, consumers will benefit both locally and globally. So it's sort of a related point, but at the expense of some of the world's poorest people. And that's the kind of regressive aspect of this whole system to keep in mind. And that's part of what Bates, I think, motivated Bates. If you read that book and read between the lines a little bit, there's this real, because he was talking about how a market would be better here and how liberalizing would be better. I think Bates was very much framed as this kind of right-wing ideologue in some of the development debates. But if you talk to him and read between the lines in the book, he's actually very concerned about the distributional consequences of this too. And it's a more complicated picture than a caricature of him intellectually, I think, than that is sometimes out there. Okay, urban residents and other net consumers, so that was the next point. Who are the big losers? African farmers, who already sort of anticipated all of this. And I just want to come back to this issue of democracy and how, it's not a coincidence that these sorts of policies were being pursued in non-democratic states. If you have a truly competitive political system, democratic political system, and one of the most important dimensions of economic policy is hurting 2/3 of the population, it's going to be very hard to sustain in a democracy, but easier to sustain in a non-democracy. So the political evolution of these countries goes in tandem with the economic policy evolution that we see. And again, it's not a coincidence that in the 90s, when you see more and more democracies emerging in Africa, you start seeing these marketing boards being dismantled. So these things are kind of evolving in a very interesting way, and I think it's one of the clearest cases that shows the interlinkages in political economy. Literally how economic policy and politics are totally intertwined in this case. I want to just throw something out there, not because I have a great answer for it, but it is a very curious relationship. I was just talking about how in sub-Saharan Africa, and I was sort of alluding to other parts of the world with the question before, you see agricultural policy tending to squeeze farmers to benefit urban consumers. Now, it turns out in rich countries, we have exactly the opposite policy. We have massive subsidies going towards our very small agricultural sector. Okay, so even more start. Developing countries, big agricultural sector, but that majority of the population gets completely screwed by public policy to subsidize small urban elites. In rich countries, which are democratic, tiny agricultural sectors get massively subsidized, disadvantaging the rest of the country that's basically paying for all of these subsidies. Does anybody have any thoughts on why we see such a divergent pattern? DJ? Yeah, so the collective action problem is something people often talk about, that you basically have this dispersed population of taxpayers, each paying a few dollars a year or something for these subsidies, and then it gets concentrated on relatively few farmers. So relatively few farmers have a lot at stake, and they organize these massive lobbying efforts, and the sort of dispersed population of taxpayers doesn't sort of act collectively to end the subsidy. So people talk about the collective action problem as being central.
I think maybe insurance it's nice to have some agricultural sector within your country. So
Yeah.
if there's an embargo next year or something, you can still be your people.
Yeah.
It's not a price we're paying, just as insurance.
Yeah, that's often mentioned. I think in some of the language, if you actually read the bills, the agricultural bills in the U.S., they always have titles like that. They always have titles like, Homeland Food Security Bill, or things like that. I remember right after the 9/11 attacks, there was a big agricultural bill passed, and it was playing completely on the fear that in wartime we need stable food supplies we can trust. And so maybe that's part of it. David.
There's also kind of like a historical political story for this things. Farms now don't have that large input to economy, but they've worked for a long time. So
Yeah.
if you look at make Congress and bills, how different roles within Congress are set up.
Yeah.
In many ways, it's set up that Congress now is
Yeah, so there's a persistence argument. Once you have a program in place and a bureaucracy in place and the lobbying groups in place, it's hard to change. And these things came to be 60, 70 years ago when farming was much more important. Yeah.
Maybe in Africa, agricultural goods are the main exporters, main revenue sources.
Yeah.
So it's okay to overproduce. So if you control the price and subsidize farmers, then they're most likely not to overproduce at a very low level. But then in the U.S., I think that's not the agricultural goods are the main exporters and whatnot. So you don't want them to overproduce.
Why is overproduction bad?
But it's
Good for consumers, right? Because more production leads to lower prices for consumers.
Right, but it might destroy the price of other goods as well. Maybe.
I have to think about that. I'll have to think about that.
Wall Street.
Okay.
Subsidies raise the value of agricultural land, which is now a big all land, all property, and a large mechanism for investment. So if we were to drop the subsidy down now, we would be dropping the value of all these farmers who have loans out to Wall Street, which Wall Street
I see what you're saying.
money on. So really, it's the large financial and large power financial institutions that are keeping subsidies in, not just the dire of the farmer.
So it's a little bit related to the point about saying, look, there's just sort of established interests in the system. And so in this case, it would be the financial sector may have an established interest. It could be lobby groups. It could be others. Okay, so I don't have an answer for this, but it is quite striking that, and it isn't, sometimes when I raise this issue for the U.S., people say, well, it's the electoral college. Iowa has 2 senators, Montana has 2 senators, so does California, and so all these sort of low population areas have lots of overrepresentation. But this also happens in Europe and in Japan and sort of over and over again. So it can't just be something about the U.S. system. Okay, so it's just a little segue. So people have alluded to this, but Bates' central point here one of the central points, focuses on the importance of urban politics rather than rural politics. What do I mean by that? And someone just made this point. Newly independent African leaders were deathly afraid of urban political organizing. And I'm overgeneralizing because there's some exceptions to this, but for the most part, the independence movements in most countries were organized in urban areas by workers, by unions, by sort of educated urban populations. Urban populations are close to the center of power. They live in the capital. They live near the radio and television stations that could be taken over. They basically are this close to the levers of power. Whereas rural populations are dispersed, and even if you are a disgruntled town somewhere in a rural area and you rise up, like nothing's going to happen. Eventually the army will come in and basically crush an uprising. Whereas in an urban area, the president's there, the parliament's there, the newspapers are there. Basically the levers of power are there. Plus, in the pre-independence period, urban political organization was just so far ahead of rural political organization in most of sub-Saharan Africa. So those are the people who are mobilized, basically, for the most part. So I took Herbst off the reading list for this course, but if you're interested in further, this is Jeff Herbst's book, RBST. If you're interested in continuities from the pre-colonial period in the nature of African politics into the colonial period and into the post-colonial period, Herbst's book tries to find these commonalities. And one of the commonalities is rulers throughout all these periods really didn't put that much attention into outlying peripheral rural areas. They never, even during the colonial period, they had a very minimal presence outside of the capital, a few key mining and agricultural centers and ports, basically. And that was true before the colonizers came, during the colonizers, and afterwards. So Bates is sort of picking up on some of this, and you can imagine just writing this down in a little bit of a formal way of saying, if I'm a ruler, what I care about, what I'm optimizing, so my decision problem, what matters to me is retaining power, let's just say. Like any ruler, any politician wants to stay in power. So I care about that, and the probability I'm going to stay in power is going to depend on the average income, the per capita income of people in urban areas and rural areas, let's say. Those are two of the determinants. Now, of course, there could be a range of other things, but these are pretty important ones. And if those incomes get too low, at some point, there's going to be unrest and uprising and insurrection, riots. But if you just imagine that my odds of retaining power are more sensitive to urban income than rural income, then I'm going to tend to adopt policies that tend to raise urban incomes more than rural incomes. It just follows. You could write down this model in 2 lines. So a very simple view about who matters politically can tell you why certain policies are chosen, at least in part. Okay, let me pause if there's any questions on this formulation. Yeah.
Is that doesn't consider the concentration of the population. So I actually looked up 73% of the population lives in rural areas.
Yeah.
So imagine
Today you're saying. Yeah.
Equals larger political capital, just given the sheer size of the population. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to know why the power is still.
Bates is writing about the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. Bates is writing about the period when democratic institutions have been swept away and governments are pursuing these agricultural policies, which have since changed. So again, since the democratic sort of movement has spread throughout sub-Saharan Africa, there are big changes in these agricultural policies. And you would imagine, like you said, if most people are rural, and now we have a relatively open system where rural voices are heard, we wouldn't expect such extreme policies favoring urban areas. But he's very much writing about those few decades after independence. Does that help make sense of it? Or?
Even if democracy is not in place, larger populations means larger capacities to organize and even lead to insurrection.
To some extent. So the numbers matter. Well, does anybody have a thought on that? Because we could, yeah. So you're saying that just the background of urban residents was different. I mean, there were certainly much higher education levels in urban areas too. So that's one difference. Let me see if there's any other thoughts, David.
Well, I have 2 thoughts. One is that colonialism, drawing lines, there might be a lot of pro-population, but they might not organize because they're tribal groups and things like that. And also just kind of more modern systems. That's why it's easier to organize people across long distances of land now, and communications, things like that. The urban population may be less than the rural, and all of it, they might have been a larger, cohesive group together.
So you were saying maybe urban was more cohesive? So I can put cohesive here because we could probably debate this one. You might think maybe urban residents are more cohesive because they're more educated, they read the same newspapers, they're kind of on the same page, and in rural areas less. Now, a particular rural location may actually be more ethnically homogeneous than the city. The city is going to tend to be quite diverse, or the capital city, but maybe there's certain things making them more or less cohesive in different dimensions. In urban areas, there was definitely much more education in this period, and education allows for much better organizing because of just literacy, being able to read what's going on in the news, understand political institutions in those early days. What other thoughts in the back?
The jobs that people have during hours, for example, workers, 10 or 12 hours a day, you don't have time to come home and think about how to take out the government risk. You have a 9-hour job in the city, with a short commute back to you.
Or a 1-hour job in the marketing board. So maybe there's more, more leisure and also just more income in urban areas. Maybe it's a luxury to be doing